Every time you're about to achieve what you've always wanted, something inside you triggers panic. It's not the market, it's not the competition, it's you against you. The exact moment you should accelerate, you pull back. Your subconscious prefers the misery it knows to the success it doesn't. It sabotages you through feelings you can't name, a wave of discomfort, tightness in your chest, a voice that says, "Not yet," and you obey without questioning. The battle isn't in the thoughts running through your head. You can control what you think, but feelings operate on a deeper layer. Fear and guilt aren't emotions that come and go. They're commands that reprogram every decision you make. You feel and act without thinking, without choosing. Right now, as you're listening to this, something in you is resisting. Do you feel it? It's discomfort. It's the urge to look away. This isn't random. It's your subconscious protecting you from change. You've been at this threshold before, always believing this time would be different. Always quitting when you were closest. The pattern only breaks when you recognize you're fighting feelings that command you without permission.
Have you ever noticed how things always seem to go wrong right when you're finally about to achieve something important? That's not a coincidence. Joseph Murphy spent decades studying this pattern and discovered that there's an invisible force operating deep within the human mind, one that sabotages success at the very moment it draws near. Thousands of people fail just inches from the finish line. They give up on the business when it's about to take off. They walk away from the relationship just when they finally found someone special. They retreat from the dream the moment every door begins to open. Why does this happen? Because while they're desperately trying to control the thousands of thoughts that bombard the mind every day, they completely ignore the true commander of reality, the deep feeling that vibrates at the center of their being. The human subconscious works in a way that defies common logic. It would literally rather keep you trapped in a painful but familiar situation than allow you to experience something new and potentially wonderful. This primitive programming uses powerful weapons, fear, guilt, and shame, to forge invisible chains that keep a person locked in a psychological comfort zone. Murphy documented how this inner resistance grows exponentially stronger as someone draws closer to a major transformation. The psychological shadow isn't some abstract theory or distant philosophical concept. It emerges through real, tangible feelings that strike precisely when you dare to dream big. In that moment, when you begin to envision extraordinary possibilities, when you allow hope to grow, the inner adversary awakens and launches its fiercest attack. Intrusive thoughts question your worthiness. Doubts appear out of nowhere. An inexplicable anxiety takes over your body. Real transformation doesn't happen by fighting this shadow or trying to eliminate it through sheer willpower. The secret lies in understanding that feelings operate on a frequency far more powerful than any mental construct. A consciously cultivated, elevated feeling can reprogram subconscious patterns in a matter of weeks, patterns that may have taken decades to form. The mechanisms through which feelings materialize into physical reality follow precise, verifiable laws. Mastery of these laws separates those who achieve their goals from those who spend their entire lives paralyzed, locked in battle with an adversary that lives inside their own mind. The universe does not deal in coincidences. When someone is on the verge of realizing a great dream, something extraordinary happens in the invisible field of consciousness. An adversary that had been dormant suddenly awakens with full force. Joseph Murphy identified this phenomenon in hundreds of clinical cases, people who literally sabotaged their own success at the very last second, as if some alien force had taken control of their decisions. Think about how many times you've heard stories like these. The entrepreneur who sold his company for almost nothing just days before it skyrocketed in value. The artist who destroyed her masterpiece moments before the exhibition. The athlete who inexplicably missed the simplest play during the championship final. These are not random cases of bad luck or incompetence. They are manifestations of a deep psychological pattern that activates when a person is just inches away from discovering their own inner gold mine. Intrusive thoughts appear like soldiers in an ambush. Do you really think you deserve this? Who do you think you are to achieve something so great? What if everything goes wrong? What if people find out you're a fraud? These voices are not random noise. They represent the final breath of resistance from the conditioned mind just before complete transformation. Murphy discovered that the closer you get to success, the more violent these psychological attacks become. The unconscious shadow operates through sophisticated mechanisms built over an entire lifetime. It knows your weak spots, your deepest insecurities, and your most primitive fears. And it uses that arsenal precisely when you start to visualize greater possibilities. It's not that you're weak or incapable. What's happening is that years of conditioning have created an internal defense system that interprets any significant change as a mortal threat. The phenomenon of somatization perfectly illustrates this mechanism. Imagine a gifted pianist who has practiced obsessively for the most important concert of his life. On the morning of the performance, he develops an inexplicable paralysis in his hands, not by accident, but because the subconscious creates physical symptoms to avoid confronting the fear of success. Psychosomatic medicine has thoroughly documented how deep-rooted beliefs of unworthiness can manifest as real physical impediments at the precise moment success approaches. The body becomes an accomplice of fear, creating physical barriers to protect the person from crossing the psychological threshold they secretly dread. Recognizing this pattern completely changes the game. When you understand that these self-sabotaging feelings are automatic responses to the nearness of success, you can finally stop taking them personally. It's not about being inadequate. It's about an outdated survival mechanism still operating as if living a mediocre life was safer than realizing your full potential. The pattern of self-sabotage at the threshold of success follows a ruthless logic. The closer you get to the goal, the stronger the internal resistance becomes. Consider how this dynamic plays out. A salesperson might spend months building a transformative deal, only to develop a crippling headache right before the final meeting. A writer could labor for years on her manuscript, and then, in a sudden destructive impulse, delete it the night before publication. An inventor might discard a revolutionary creation, suddenly convinced that the world isn't ready. These seemingly irrational behaviors make perfect sense once we understand the nature of the inner adversary. It doesn't attack when you're far from the goal. That would be a waste of energy. It waits patiently, watching, calculating, until the moment you're about to cross the portal of transformation. That's the critical instant when the heavy artillery is unleashed. Doubts you never knew existed rise from the depths. Irrational fears flood the body. A paralyzing anxiety appears out of nowhere, accompanied by real physical symptoms: racing heart, cold sweat, nausea, dizziness. The inner adversary has its own intelligence. It studies your patterns, learns your weaknesses, and memorizes your emotional triggers. When you're about to make that important call, it whispers that your voice sounds strange today. When you're about to sign the contract of your dreams, it creates an inexplicable sense of dread. When you finally meet the partner you've always wanted, it awakens insecurities that have been dormant for decades. The first step toward freedom from limiting patterns is recognizing this dynamic as it happens. When you feel that resistance rising, when those sabotaging thoughts begin their assault, you must understand. This is a sign that you're on the right path. The greater the inner resistance, the closer you are to something truly transformative. The adversary only spends energy attacking when there's something valuable to protect. In this case, the old identity that must die so the new one can be born. Awareness of this inner adversary marks the beginning of true psychological freedom. Every human being carries within both the unlimited potential for greatness and the sophisticated mechanisms that try to prevent it. Understanding this fundamental duality opens the door to exploring the divided nature of the human being, a timeless inner conflict with roots far deeper than we might ever imagine. The word devil hides a surprising revelation about human nature. It comes from the Greek word diabolos, which in turn derives from diabolein, literally meaning to throw apart or to divide. But the most revealing meaning comes from sacred geometry. Dyad represents the primordial split, the division of what was meant to be one. It's not about a horned being with a pitchfork. It's about the fundamental fragmentation that every human being carries within. Joseph Murphy explored this inner division in depth, discovering that the conflict between the conscious and the unconscious mind creates most of human suffering. You experience it every day. The part of you that wants to wake up early battles, the one that wants to stay in bed. The part that desires financial abundance clashes with the one that feels guilty for having money. The part that longs for love wrestles with the one that fears intimacy. This inner civil war drains vital energy that could instead be used to create extraordinary realities. Swiss psychiatrist Carl Gustav Jung revolutionized our understanding of this duality through his concept of individuation. Jung realized that human beings are born fragmented and spend their lives trying to become whole. He mapped how we all carry multiple personalities within us. The person we show to the world, the one we hide in the shadows, the wounded child, the inner sage, the warrior, the lover. Each of these parts has its own desires, fears, and agendas, often in direct conflict with one another. Murphy went further and demonstrated how this internal division systematically sabotages our efforts to manifest what we want. When you consciously affirm, "I deserve abundance," but unconsciously carry the program, "Money is dirty," which command does the subconscious obey? Always the deeper one, the one charged with the strongest emotion. The divided mind cancels its own orders, creating an endless loop of frustration and self-sabotage. The psychological shadow represents everything you refuse to acknowledge within yourself. Jung discovered that we project this shadow onto others. The traits that most irritate you in someone else are usually the ones you repress within your own psyche. Murphy applied this principle in a practical way. As long as you fight against your shadow, it will fight back with double the strength. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The more force you use, the more violently it pops back to the surface. The Jungian concept of shadow projection reveals a fascinating pattern. Ask someone to list the traits they despise most in other people: anger, arrogance, dishonesty, cowardice, greed. Then observe their behavior under extreme stress. Inevitably, they will display those exact same traits they claim to hate. Why? Because we spend so much energy repressing those parts of ourselves that when our defenses collapse, they erupt with accumulated force. Integrating the shadow doesn't mean becoming a bad person or letting destructive impulses run wild. It means recognizing that you contain the full spectrum of humanity: saint and sinner, genius and fool, hero and coward. Murphy found that truly successful people aren't those who eliminate their dark aspects, but those who have learned to channel that dark energy constructively. An aggressive executive who acknowledges his aggression can direct it toward conquering markets instead of destroying relationships. A person who accepts their manipulative tendencies can become a master of ethical persuasion. Someone who embraces their obsessive side can channel that intensity into mastering a complex skill. The shadow holds raw power. The problem is that it's usually aimed against ourselves. The process of psychological unification demands extraordinary courage. You must look honestly at the parts of yourself you've spent a lifetime denying. You must admit that the demon you've been fighting isn't out there, it's right here, inside. Murphy documented that when a person genuinely accepts their shadow, something remarkable happens. The energy that was wasted on internal warfare becomes available for creative power. Wholeness is not a destination, but an ongoing process. Each new level of success awakens new aspects of the shadow that must be integrated. The entrepreneur who builds an empire discovers fears about losing it all. The artist who gains recognition encounters the terror of irrelevance. The spiritual leader faces temptations of power and control. The journey never ends, but with each integration, more authentic power is released. This understanding transforms the entire inner battle. You stop trying to eliminate parts of yourself and begin to orchestrate all of them into harmony. True power emerges when the conscious and the unconscious mind move in the same direction. But for that to happen, you must first understand which force truly commands this alignment, and it's not the one most people imagine. Human experience reveals a startling truth that completely contradicts what the positive thinking movement has taught for decades. Mechanically repeated affirmations have very limited power when they collide with opposing deep emotions. Joseph Murphy discovered, through years of research, that powerful feelings operate in a dimension of consciousness that completely transcends the reach of conscious thought. Feelings command the subconscious through mechanisms most people don't even know exist. The subconscious doesn't process verbal language the way the conscious mind does. It responds exclusively to emotional charge, to the vibrational quality that accompanies every thought, word, or visualization. When someone repeats, "I am prosperous," while feeling scarcity deep in their gut, the subconscious completely ignores the words and obeys only the emotional command: lack. This is the fundamental reason millions of positive thinkers remain frustrated, repeating affirmations without seeing tangible results. Murphy showed that feeling is the original language of the subconscious. Long before we developed the ability to speak, we responded to the world through sensations and emotions. That primitive system remains the primary channel of communication with the deeper layers of the mind. Words are secondary translations, diluted and often distorted. Feeling is direct communication without intermediaries and is impossible to fake for the subconscious. The vibrational frequency we emit determines what we attract, and that frequency is set by our dominant feelings, not by our occasional thoughts. The human energy field continuously pulses emotional information into the universe. This field cannot be disguised or manipulated by surface-level mental techniques. It instantly reveals the emotional truth vibrating at the core of your being, regardless of the stories your conscious mind tries to tell. Consider the relentless mathematics of feeling versus thought. One moment of genuine terror imprints on the subconscious more deeply than 1,000 hours of mechanical positive affirmations. A single instant of true ecstasy programs the deep mind more powerfully than years of forced visualizations. Murphy identified that emotional intensity exponentially amplifies subconscious programming power, while mental repetition without emotional charge has minimal impact. The feeling of unworthiness operates like a virus in the operating system of consciousness. It corrupts every new program you try to install over it. It doesn't matter how many success techniques you learn, how many self-help books you read, or how many seminars you attend. If, at the foundation of your being, there vibrates the core sensation of inadequacy, everything else will be built on quicksand. The structure will eventually collapse, not because of a lack of conscious effort, but because of weakness in the emotional foundation. The hierarchy of manifestation follows an unchanging sequence. Deep feelings generate thought patterns shape perceptions guide actions, and actions crystallize results. Trying to change results by starting with thoughts is like trying to move a train by pushing the last car. The engine is the feeling. Ignoring that means wasting energy on efforts the subconscious simply doesn't recognize as valid commands. Murphy discovered that emotional intensity acts as an amplifier of manifestation. A weak feeling, even if positive, produces weak results. A powerful feeling, even if brief, can alter the entire course of a life. The subconscious doesn't count how many times you thought something. It measures how deeply you felt it. This is why a single trauma can leave marks for decades, while thousands of neutral experiences fade without a trace. The disconnection between surface thought and deep feeling creates the cognitive dissonance that paralyzes manifestation. The physical body always reveals emotional truth through tension, illness, posture, and involuntary expressions. Every cell vibrates at the frequency of the dominant feeling, creating a morphogenetic field that organizes reality around it. Trying to deceive this system with mental tricks is like trying to hide the sun behind a sieve. The light always leaks through the holes. True mastery of reality arises when we understand that feelings are not reactions to external events. They are commands that create those events. Murphy proved again and again that consciously cultivating elevated emotions, regardless of external circumstances, reorganizes those very circumstances to match the new emotional frequency. But here lies the next challenge. The subconscious has developed sophisticated defense mechanisms against emotional reprogramming, and those mechanisms operate with their own kind of intelligence. When you are on the verge of a major transformation in your life, the subconscious mind activates an emergency protocol that Joseph Murphy called the preservation of the known. This deep psychological mechanism interprets any substantial change as a threat to survival, even when that change clearly represents an improvement. The human nervous system was programmed over millions of years to see the familiar as safe and the unknown as potentially lethal. That ancient programming still runs today, silently sabotaging every attempt at personal evolution. The subconscious mind quite literally hates change. It operates through established patterns, automatic routines, and conditioned responses that have been tested and validated by past survival. When you try to create a new reality, you're essentially asking the subconscious to abandon its entire security database and trust something untested. The result is predictable: massive resistance, expressed through intensified feelings of fear, anxiety, and panic. Murphy identified a fascinating paradox. The subconscious consistently prefers known pain over unknown pleasure. That's why victims of abusive relationships often return to their abusers. Why people stay in jobs they hate for decades. Why destructive patterns repeat generation after generation. The familiarity of pain offers a distorted sense of safety. At least you know what to expect. Unknown pleasure, on the other hand, represents unmapped territory, where anything could happen. Primitive emotions act as armed guards of the status quo. Fear rises to paralyze action. Shame emerges to lower self-worth. Guilt appears to punish attempts at growth. These are not random emotions. They are precise weapons fired by the subconscious to keep you exactly where you are. Murphy demonstrated that the closer you come to real change, the more intense these sabotaging emotions become. They are the subconscious's last line of defense against transformation. The moment you are closest to victory mathematically coincides with the moment of maximum inner resistance. Imagine a rubber band being stretched. The closer it gets to the breaking point, the greater the tension. The subconscious operates in the same way. When you are seconds from crossing the threshold into a new reality, the accumulated force of past conditioning explodes in one final surge of resistance. Most people give up right then, not because they are weak, but because the inner pressure becomes almost unbearable. The psychological comfort zone functions like an invisible prison built by the prisoner themselves. Its walls are made of irrational fears. Its bars are limiting beliefs. Its guards are automatic negative emotions. The most disturbing part is that the prisoner passionately defends their cell, fighting anyone who tries to set them free. The subconscious convinces you that the prison is protection, that limitations are safety, that mediocrity is wisdom. Murphy discovered that the subconscious uses sophisticated sabotage strategies that go far beyond mere negative thoughts. It creates physical symptoms, sudden pain, unexplained fatigue, convenient illness, always appearing at crucial moments. It manipulates the perception of time, making opportunities seem either premature or too late. It distorts the interpretation of neutral events, turning coincidences into supposed signs that you should give up. The concept of an emotional breaking point explains why so many genuine transformations are preceded by deep crises. The subconscious gradually intensifies resistance until it reaches an unbearable peak. At that point, only two options remain: retreat into the comfort zone or pass through the emotional fire and emerge transformed on the other side. Murphy observed that those who persist through this psychological inferno always discover that the resistance collapses suddenly, as if someone had flipped a switch. The critical understanding that separates successful people from the rest is not greater courage or stronger willpower, it's deep awareness. They understand that intense feelings of resistance are not signs of failure, but signals that a breakthrough is near. They've learned to interpret fear as a compass, pointing exactly toward where they need to go. When they feel the panic of change, they recognize it as confirmation that they are on the right path. This cognitive reinterpretation turns resistance from an enemy into an involuntary ally. The subconscious also works through return triggers, situations, people, or environments that instantly reactivate old patterns. You may be progressing steadily when, suddenly, a familiar smell, a song, or a casual encounter awakens all your old programming. Within seconds, years of inner work can seem to evaporate. Murphy explained that these triggers are subconscious tests, checks to see whether your change is real or merely superficial. Mastering your feelings means understanding that they are both the problem and the solution. The same system that creates resistance through negative emotion can be reprogrammed to generate support through positive emotion. But this requires something more refined than simply trying to feel good. It requires precise emotional alchemy, the conscious transformation of emotional raw material into fuel for evolution. The mathematics of thought exposes the absolute impossibility of direct mental control. Thousands of thoughts pass through the human mind every single day, 300,000 per week, more than 15 million per year. Trying to monitor, filter, and correct each one is like trying to count grains of sand during a desert storm. Joseph Murphy understood that the obsession with controlling thoughts is the longest and least effective path to transformation. The direct path operates through emotional transmutation. Years of repeated negative thinking don't exist as separate units in the subconscious. They condense, crystallize, and fuse into one dominant negative feeling of extraordinary density. Like sediment at the bottom of a lake, layer upon layer of similar thoughts harden into a single emotional rock. You can spend years trying to remove that formation thought by thought, or you can dissolve it instantly through the proper emotional alchemy. True transformation requires abandoning the battle on the mental battlefield and operating directly in the territory of feelings. Murphy developed specific emotional transmutation protocols that bypass the need for constant mental management. The core principle is simple but revolutionary. Instead of trying to think differently to feel differently, you learn to feel differently first, and the thoughts naturally rearrange themselves as a result, immersing yourself in environments that naturally elevate your emotional state functions as subconscious reprogramming technology. Places of extraordinary natural beauty, mountains, oceans, ancient forests, emit frequencies that automatically synchronize the human emotional field with higher patterns. This isn't mysticism, it's applied physics. The human body is a resonant instrument that inevitably harmonizes with the dominant frequencies of its surroundings. Interaction with people who vibrate at high emotional frequencies works like direct energy transfer. When you spend time with someone who is genuinely fulfilled, your energy field literally recalibrates through resonance. Murphy found that 15 minutes in the presence of a person in a state of deep joy produces more transformation than months of solitary mental effort. Emotional contagion is a universal law. You inevitably tune yourself to the dominant frequency around you. Music acts as instant emotional technology. Certain frequencies, harmonies, and melodic progressions trigger specific emotional states regardless of conscious thought. These psychoacoustic mechanisms are well documented. Music influences the nervous system through neural pathways that connect auditory processing directly to the brain's emotional centers. The subconscious cannot resist music's vibrational command because it bypasses mental filters and goes straight to the emotional core. The presence of young children and animals grants access to pure emotional states unpolluted by mental conditioning. Children under 7 operate predominantly in theta brainwaves, the same state that governs direct subconscious programming. When you engage genuinely with them, your brain naturally synchronizes to that frequency, opening windows for emotional reprogramming. Animals, especially dogs and cats, sustain states of pure presence that automatically reduce anxiety and raise human well-being. Feeling is the true philosopher's stone of human alchemy. Just as medieval alchemists sought to transmute lead into gold, emotional alchemy transmutes dense states of suffering into higher frequencies of fulfillment. Murphy demonstrated that this transmutation is not a poetic metaphor. It's a measurable process that alters brain chemistry, neural patterns, and even genetic expression. Faith emerges as the most powerful feeling in the arsenal of human transmutation, not necessarily religious faith, but faith as an emotional state of absolute certainty, independent of external evidence. Murphy discovered that the feeling of faith has the unique power to instantly dissolve years of negative programming. A single moment of genuine faith imprints on the subconscious a command more powerful than decades of accumulated doubt. Deep states of depression can be transmuted into states of fullness through specific protocols of emotional alchemy. The key is not to fight depression directly, but to create experiences that naturally induce emotional states incompatible with it. Genuine gratitude cannot coexist with despair. True compassion dissolves self-hatred. Deep awe in the presence of beauty temporarily neutralizes emotional numbness. Murphy identified what he called sudden emotional inversion, moments when the entire charge of negative emotion flips instantly into its opposite. Like superheated water transforming into vapor at the precise boiling point, intensely magnified negative feelings can suddenly transmute into profound liberation. These moments of grace are not random miracles. They are predictable results of precise emotional laws. Consistent exposure to experiences that elevate emotional frequency gradually reconditions your subconscious emotional baseline. The subconscious begins to accept higher states as the new normal. Feelings that once seemed unreachable become familiar. States that once required conscious effort become automatic. But this delicate alchemy requires careful protection because external forces constantly attempt to contaminate the process of transmutation. When you are on the brink of a major achievement, your energy field becomes extraordinarily vulnerable to external interference. Joseph Murphy discovered that during moments of transition between one reality and another, energetic permeability increases exponentially. It's as if, like a snake shedding its skin, you become temporarily exposed without your usual defenses, susceptible to influences that would normally never penetrate your psychic boundaries. Feelings possess a contagious force that science is only beginning to understand. An environment charged with negativity can instantly collapse an emotional frequency that took weeks to cultivate. A single person vibrating in deep despair can contaminate the emotional field of an entire room. Murphy documented that the physical proximity to dense emotional states literally changes the brain chemistry of everyone present, creating a chain reaction of vibrational decline. The phenomenon of energetic vampirism, in which certain people consistently drain the psychological energy of others through manipulative or emotionally demanding behavior, is well documented in interpersonal psychology. Some individuals, consciously or not, have developed the ability to feed on the vital energy of others to sustain their own dysfunctional patterns. They are drawn to you precisely when you're vibrating at higher frequencies, like predators attracted to light. Through drama, victimhood, or subtle provocation, they lure you into lowering your frequency to match theirs, where they can feed on your life force. Truly successful people develop rigorous protocols for energetic shielding. They understand that protecting their emotional state is not a luxury. It's an absolute necessity for achieving and maintaining success. Murphy observed that the difference between those who keep their success and those who lose it repeatedly lies directly in their ability to manage the emotional environment around them. Conscious emotional shielding operates through multiple layers of protection. The first involves carefully choosing physical environments. Places with a history of suffering, hospitals, courts, cemeteries, retain residual emotional imprints that affect everyone who enters. In contrast, places of celebration and accomplishment, successful theatres, thriving companies, the homes of fulfilled people, naturally emit frequencies that elevate emotional states. The conscious choice of where you spend your time directly determines the quality of subconscious programming you absorb. The second layer of protection involves relentless curation of relationships. Murphy discovered that we maintain invisible energetic connections with every significant person in our lives, even when physically distant. These connections function like two-way transmission cables. You continuously receive and send their emotional frequencies. Maintaining ties with chronically negative individuals is like leaving an open sewage pipe running straight into your energy field. The moment immediately before a great achievement represents the period of maximum energetic vulnerability. The subconscious, sensing imminent change, temporarily lowers its defenses as part of the transition process. During this critical window, influences that would normally be neutralized can penetrate deeply. A casual criticism can devastate. A stranger's doubt can paralyze. A single glance of disbelief can dismantle years of preparation. Feelings function as keys that unlock specific vaults within the subconscious mind. Each emotion activates a distinct set of memories, abilities, and limitations. The feeling of confidence opens access to hidden talents and dormant capabilities. The feeling of fear instantly awakens every stored trauma and failure. Murphy demonstrated that the ability to control which vault is open determines the resources available for creating reality. The subconscious simultaneously houses your greatest potential and your greatest vulnerability. Like a quantum computer of infinite possibilities, it contains the codes to manifest any imaginable reality, but it also stores every emotional virus, unhealed trauma, and inherited sabotaging belief. Each feeling you allow to dominate your consciousness determines which part of that vast system takes control. The most powerful form of energetic protection comes from understanding a single truth. Feeling always dominates, always without exception. Once you truly grasp this, you stop wasting energy on futile mental battles and focus entirely on managing your emotional states. You realize that allowing anyone or anything to lower your emotional frequency is equivalent to handing over the keys to your destiny. Murphy discovered that, in the final moments before a breakthrough, the universe seems to test your resolve by sending the most intense forms of interference imaginable. People from your past reappear, old problems resurface, conquered fears return with multiplied strength. These are not signs that you're on the wrong path. They are confirmations that you are about to cross the threshold. The inner adversary mobilizes every resource, both internal and external, in one last desperate attempt to stop your transformation. Understanding these mechanisms provides the ultimate key to dismantling the inner adversary and allowing abundance to flow naturally toward you. Yet true mastery of these principles requires more than intellectual understanding. It demands consistent practice, daily connection with elevated states of consciousness, accessing dimensions of being where limiting programming cannot survive. Every change begins with the recognition of your role as a co-creator, and the only way to connect with that divine intelligence is through meditation. We have developed a set of audio tools designed to help you access that higher state of awareness. To learn more and gain immediate access, click the link on the screen or in the comments. If this message resonated with you, write in the comments, "It made sense to me."